We're here at the National Farm Machinery Show in Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm sitting with Randy Mann. He is a farmer in Auburn, Kentucky. He has row crops, corn, soybean, wheat also?
Yes.
Some wheat, and also he raises beef cattle.
Feeder cattle.
Feeder cattle. I would like Mr. Mann to explain to our viewers what genetically modified crops are.
Well, genetically modified could be several different things. Most time when the scientists breed into those plants to either enhance yield or enhance other traits, whether it's disease resistance or Roundup resistance. It could be a lot of things in the terminology of GMO, which is a good thing for us as farmers because it enhances yield, but it also enhances traits to bring out of that plant where it's drought tolerance, or it could be extra protein or oil in that plant. So it's a good thing for us as in the industry, or as far as us as farmers to sell overseas, because in other words, it probably creates yield.
How do they get the genetic material? Because it's actually from other species. Say for BT corn, they're trying to put a bacteria or a protein in the plant that those worms don't like. So they can't destroy the crop. How do they get that genetic material in the plant?
It was done years ago by a shotgun method, they called it, to build into that plant or into that seed. Now they do it, they can do it within so many days. They can put that plant in there and actually grow it and reproduce it a lot quicker with the new technology. It's usually induced by either syringe method, but there's another way. They've got a new technology that I think Monsanto's come up with, which is will greatly increase the time or replications they can make within that plant to test it, make sure it's in it, but also make sure it's something feasible for that company to enhance or endorse.
Well, I think there's a lot of fear out there about the consumption of these genetically modified crops. How do you talk to maybe your consumer, somebody that would buy your crop, about the safety of consuming those crops?
Well, the crops are probably safer now than they ever were with the no-till system we have in place, the reduced amount of chemicals we put on our plants. The crops we have, I think, are perfectly safe for consumption, human consumption, also for industrial uses and for livestock uses as well. Our plants now are, really dependent on weather, not as much as chemicals for keeping them clean and other things, but our plants are healthier. I think they're not as much stress as they used to be, and it produces, I think, a healthy plant overall.
Well, great. About this safety, I think I've heard that some 3 trillion meals have been consumed that have genetically modified foods in them, and I have not heard of anybody getting sick.
I haven't either. Even anywhere in part of the world, I've never heard of anyone getting sick or anything wrong with our GMO or genetically modified organism is what it's called, but never heard of anyone getting sick anywhere that I've been. I've been all over the world, and I've always heard good things about our crops as far as overseas because of cleanliness, no weed seed or foreign material in our crops, and it's a perfect example of why we do this is to enhance yield, but also enhance the health of our overall being.
Because we're with biotechnology, we're able to produce more crops on less land, and is that a benefit as we go forward?
We've got, I saw numbers the other day, we've got close to 7 billion people we're feeding now. By 2050, we'll be 9 billion people. Just think about that, 9 billion people to feed. How are we going to do it, even with South America in the market now and still got some acres to be put in production? How are we going to feed those people? Well, we're going to feed them through genetically modified organisms, or GMO. That's how we're going to do it. We're going to make a plant to yield more, but also going to be a healthier plant. There's other things that we're going to have healthy oils, healthy proteins coming out of those plants. We've got to have them. We've got to have them to feed people, but also for food security for our nation as well as others. So we've got to have those traits built in our plants, whether it's wheat, soybeans, or corn, and in other hay even for our livestock. So we've got to have it from now on to produce more, to feed more.
And I think one of my favorite benefits, that you alluded to this earlier, but the environmental benefits is you don't have to spray the crops with as much chemicals because of those traits.
That's correct. And, we're going to no-till systems. Years ago, I think Kentucky was one of the leaders in no-till. We did this back in the 60s and 70s. And I was part of that. I grew up in the 60s and 70s where we did start no-tilling. And we saw the benefits of no erosion in our soil. We went down to no-till systems because one thing is fuel. We saved a lot on fuel, but also, too, we learned how to do that. It took a lot of education for us as being in the days of cultivation. Stop doing cultivation, go to no-till. So we found out it took less fertilizer, less chemicals, and also took less fuel. And so we saved a lot in that era. And now we've even gained more knowledge with the GMO crops coming on board. 2 passes over our soybeans is it, and they're clean. And that's what we have to sell to the world. Used to be all our soybeans or corn stayed within the states. Now it's shipped out. Half of our soybeans go out of port. 10 to 20% of our corn goes out of port. So we've got to think about that as we ship out products. We've got to have a good, clean product. And I think GMO is part of that, or probably a large account of that.
One of the arguments that I've heard is specifically for Roundup Ready corn or soybeans, that allows the farmers to spray more Roundup. So is that a bad thing?
We don't, we manage that just like we do anything. It's a cost. So we try to get down as less as possible as Roundup. Roundup's a cost to us, and so we try to get down within 1 to 2 quarts per acre, and that's 1 quart over the land to get it clean, and about another quart to go over the top. You can cut that down to 22 ounces per trip. So it's been an improvement because Roundup is getting better, but the surfactants we're putting with it are better. And so it's getting better contact with our weeds and taking those out.
Well, thank you very much. I have learned quite a bit about genetically modified, no-till, and some of the technology that farmers are using today. So I want to thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.